Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar series for developing personal leadership and spotting opportunities in crisis. Today we will be joined by Stewart Wu, Linda Feng, and Dorene Seah, and Peter Chu. As chairman of Monte board, I'm excited to start hosting these events virtually, given the COVID-19 scenario that we're all facing with today. Hope everyone is staying healthy and staying safe, sheltering in place. Monte, Jade, just as a reminder, we are being recorded at this current time. This will be broadcasted and posted later on our website. So feel free to come out to our website and check out all the events that we are doing for the rest of the year as well. Monte Jade was founded in 1989 by immigrants from Asia who are under-networked and under-resourced. They came together and supported one another in building their businesses and supported one another in growing and solving very, very challenging problems that they currently faced at that time. Many of them came and built billion-dollar businesses, and from those relationships still retain, and we still have Monte Jade here today. Today, we focus on three predominant pillars. Number one, we focus on our mentorship events. Our mentorship is focused on developing Asian Americans within the corporate environment, where we are underrepresented at the senior leadership levels, at the C-level, VP level, and at the board level. The second pillar that we focus on is around interview series. So these interview series, we interview successful community leaders to really listen to their life story of how they grew their careers, the challenges that they struggled with, and some advice that they have for mentees and or people developing in their careers. Lastly, we do events where we gather people together and technology events where we focus on new technologies and new developments in the ecosystem that become opportunities for our members and or investment opportunities. At this time, I want to thank our sponsors, namely UMC and Deloitte, who have been consistent sponsors for us. Without their support, we would not be here today, and we would not be able to continue to bring great events to our audience base. So we really thank our sponsors for making this happen. Ryan?
Hi, everyone. Just really quick. For those who are newer to Zoom, please make sure to use two particular features. The Q&A section is where we'll be taking questions for our panelists. Be sure also to upvote questions if someone else has already asked a question that you'd like answered. In addition, we do have a chat room available, and so please feel free to use the chat to talk to one another. And we'll also be monitoring the chat to answer any questions there or direct them to the QA for later if needed.
Great, thank you. At this time, I have the great pleasure of introducing Peter Chu. He's a good friend of mine. He's the former chairman of Monte Jade, and I'm really excited to have him involved and running this event for us today. Peter, take it away.
Good morning, and thank you, David. I've always wanted to say, actually, Chairman Jang, thank you for the introduction. And I want to also say welcome to our panelists and also to our moderating staff. We have Casey, Xiaojing, and also Ryan and Gloria. We have a very large team putting this event together. Also, thanks to people like Denise and Larry, who's brought the idea to the table on doing this series. I think this has been, hopefully a lot of work, a very, very productive series. But let me jump right into. I want to just do a very light introduction because we will have the speakers speak for themselves, which they can do a much better job than I can. Stewart is starting on the very, very left. He's someone who has seen many of these turns and ups and downs in the valley. He's a sort of fellow board member at Monte Jade, who's done a lot of great things in the industry, also for our community. And Linda Feng, who I've known for a long time. We worked together as early as 1989. And she stuck with the art of doing a lot more software, but I'll have her talk about herself later. And last but not least, also very excited to have Dorene Seah join us. Dorene is sort of the shiny example of what the community has been able to attract, someone with a lot of experience in the very relevant to the topic today, but also we've seen her grown within the Mount Jade community to become another volunteer. She's a peer mentor, a great help in sort of guiding my family, in providing a lot of advice to my mentorship family, which we can talk about a little bit more some other time. But let me just set the stage. So David, can we just jump into the slides? these are just two sort of data sheets you've seen from last time, the COVID-19 data. Let's go to the next one. These are from previous seminars. I don't want to cover too much. It's about the pandemic. It's about the job situation. But let's bring update to sort of these same numbers. Next slide, please. So with the two previous slides you've seen in seminar number 1, in seminar number 2, now we've seen just simply in the US, the case has gone over 1 million. And the number of deaths is staggering. And, you know, just beyond that, the longer term impact, when we talk about jobless claims, it's up, you know, it's topping 30 million during the pandemic. This is something that if you look across time, you know, we put together this chart that look at going back in time since 1997, and even going back to all the great, probably the Great Depression, we're talking about the last 70, 80 years. This is one of the greatest crises, not only in terms of the scope, which is global, and the speed by which this is spreading, how it's impacted every sector, every industry, every company. But it's actually, I think the most devastating part is, or the difficult part is the uncertainty around the duration. How long and how bad is this going to be? I think we're getting better at sort of collecting the data and getting some limited visibility, but we do not have that certainty. And I think that makes this very, very unique crisis. And lastly, but not all, it not only is it impacting everybody globally, but it has a very, very personal impact. We all have people within our network, within our reach, within our relationships that are working in the front line or actually directly impacted, or in fact, you know, severely impacted by this crisis. So it's nothing to be taken lightly. But we talked about a lot of that in the first seminar. And in the last 2 weeks, we decided to come up with a second seminar following up on, well, there's a lot of uncertainty, but there's going to be an end to this. So looking ahead and seeing, you know, in these very challenging times, what are still opportunities? In fact, not just down the road of when we come out of it, but what are the opportunities now? And because these are opportunities for people who embrace leadership. So I see a lot of you, in fact, many of you are part of our mentorship program. This is what we're all about. We're about developing leaders. And developing leadership is one thing. It's like going to a class, you can read about it, you can hear about it. But in times of crisis, this is where the lessons come in. And practice, practice, practice. This is an opportunity. And this is what we want to focus on today. So David, shall we take to the next slide? So to set the stage, we've already talked about the impact. But today, the structure of this seminar, we've invited Linda, who's a ed tech education industry expert, because I think this is one vertical we can take as an example of both how it's disrupted, how it's impacted negatively, but yet there's also a lot of wind behind the sail for certain initiative that's been kind of brewing along for a long, long time. It's always about next 5 years, next 3 years, but now it's next 3 weeks. Next slide, please. And so Linda will talk about, I mean, just simply at the very high level, right? The opportunity, for example, for Google, for Blackboard, for Canvas, for Zoom, they're seeing numbers that they never dreamed, you know, this is something that's handed to them. Now, in some ways, that sounds like a great opportunity, but it's actually also a crisis for them. I mean, one of the things about having too much of a good thing actually creates a lot of issues. So I think Linda will cover this in much more detail. Next slide, please. And then, but we also wanted to sort of take that outside, give us a broader perspective in terms of, that's what EdTech's doing. But we want to visit 2 other perspectives. That is, how, you know, especially here in Silicon Valley, especially in our community, we talk a lot about innovation. We talk about investing, not just money, but investing in ourselves. So we've invited Stewart, who's seen quite a few crises. Stewart and I about the same age. So we can talk about 3, 4, maybe living through 5 crises. But a consistent theme is, at least if you look at our community, it's one where it's always invested, continually investing in people, in innovations. And if you have that foundation, then perhaps you have the opportunity to transform both the individual and the company into something great. Next slide, please. And you know, I think Dorene will talk a lot about large companies, which is, they're full of resources. They've gone into a lot of different business opportunities, and they've grown. And in fact, if you look at generally going back, yes, we've gone through a few bumps, but all the other bumps are not as big as the current bump that we're facing. So let's take the unicorns as an example of, you know, the new kind of the young baby large companies. Unicorns are great, but they're kind of fairy tale creatures, if you ask me. They thrive when everything's sort of in that perfect hunky-dory environment where there's plenty of money, they can get the best talents they can, and then also everybody's spending, and you know everything's working, and you can go anywhere, you can do anything, and it's fairyland. And we lived that dream for, you know, again and again in Silicon Valley. But I think at times like this, where there's no spending, where there's no access, where people are locked in, that changes. So Stewart talked to us about the examples of Uber, Robinhood, and Airbnb. These are companies with a lot of resources, but when they come to this crunch, they have to do something very different. They have to start, you know, massive discounts and do a lot of ways to spend money just to stay in some of their businesses, maybe not in all their businesses, right? So Stewart will cover a lot more about the idea. I really like the analogy to camels. This is about, not about unicorns, because the fairy tale environment's not there. So, you know, can we still talk about unicorns? It's about surviving, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's wet or it's dry. And it's about focus, which we'll talk a lot more. If you really focus, and Stewart talked about his stories of, he said, downturns. This is the best time for him if you look at his history. So we'll talk about sustainability and resilience. And then if you look back in history, you can search this up yourself. Atlassian, Grubhub, Qualtrics, many companies came out of great recession. It's a time of consolidation, time of focus. It's a time where the real companies do what they do better than anybody else. Okay, David, let's just go on to the actual presentation itself. As I promised, I'd love to sort of just invite all of you, at least our panelists, to speak a little bit about their own experience. Let's start with just introductions, you know, going from Dorene, Linda, and Stewart. Maybe talk about your background, but maybe talk about where you were during maybe one or two of the large road bumps that you've gone through in your career. Oh, Dorene, you need to unmute yourself. This is the Zoom hiccup that 99% of people hit.
Sure, Peter. Happy to. I've been with Amazon for the past 8.5 years, focusing on business transformation and program management. And prior to that, at several medium to large corporations like Danaher and Tektronix. During my first ever downturn in 2001, I was actually in Oklahoma, literally a few months into my first job when the terrorist event of September 11 happened. I was in the aerospace industry at that time, and like today, it was an industry that was heavily impacted. While I didn't get laid off, it was very emotionally impactful because I saw a lot of new and old friends getting laid off during that time. That crisis led me to my next role, which is an amazing role in Oregon. And after that, I was in a company called Plana Systems in Oregon. And then in 2008, while I was in high tech, the financial crisis hit. And again, I ended up voluntarily switching companies to a different dream role. In all of these times of crisis, I was fortunately able to fare pretty well. Each position put me in a significantly better place financially and provided much better opportunities.
Thank you. We'll dive into much deeper about those experiences shortly.
All right. Well, so I think that was I think Peter, thanks for doing the intro, and hopefully this is a good session that everyone will get something out of. So I'll just share a little perspective in my background. So my name is Linda Feng. So I'm a software architect and I work in the education technology field, as Peter said. I'd like to say that for 30 years, I pretty much helped design systems that either you or your children have used in school. This is my first year serving as an executive mentor, and it's been a great experience. Looking to hopefully continue this going forward. So kind of responding to the question about downturns and where I was and how I've gone through them. I think so during the 2001 downturn and during the terrorist attack during 9/11, I actually was in New York. We were living there. My husband was doing a fellowship at Mount Sinai in New York. I actually was working remote for Oracle, and one of the things that came out of that, while it was a very challenging time to be in New York City, it made me realize that remote work is actually viable and also could be valuable. We were able to continue working even through the sort of the way that the city really froze up and nothing really happened in that city for probably close to 6 to 9 months, let alone the rest of the country and the rest of the world. In 2008, the downturn really precipitated a movement, in my opinion, where companies were moving more and more to the cloud. So I see that downturn as something that really lifted and started shifting a lot of companies into that kind of pay-as-you-go infrastructure. And that's going to be important later for the crisis that we're in right now. And I would say that the education industry wasn't as much affected by that economic downturn. But for me personally, that precipitated a move from the large company, which was Oracle, to a smaller startup, which was Instructure, that makes the Canvas learning management system. So having seen kind of the experience of bigger companies as well as smaller companies, now kind of in that education space, I feel like I have now a very broad perspective.
Thank you, Linda. Stewart.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stewart Wu. I'm probably the longest board member for Monte among all this men besides Peter. Yeah, we know each other for a long time. Anyhow, so my background is very simple: entrepreneur. Yeah. So yes, the first downturn, if I want to say, is actually back in '92, or before I got my green card. The company went into a massive layoff. I think that's the only time I've ever been fear of. And then I sold my first company in 2000, and then the second company in 2008. So mostly, you know, and then people say, hey, Stewart, maybe the next time you sell the third company, that's when the next downturn coming, because that's how the history talk. So my perspective is very simple. When you're young, you have no fear. Just do whatever you want to do. I think I have a lot of mentees come to me when they want to change their job, you know, do something. Should I try this? Should I try that? I always said this one thing. When you are young, you have ability to go to casino. Don't wait until you're too old to go to the casino. And then you have no way, you have no money, you have no future to spend. You can't even walk. And so this is my perspective. So we can talk about it a little bit later. Thank you.
Well, I think I like that perspective too, is that, you know, I think we have a lot of young people in the audience here today. And in some ways, well, this is one crisis where everybody's feeling it. But how you engage with it, I think, very important. I want to just highlight, sorry, Linda, to keep drawing you in on the 30-year history. And when you were first hired on, you were hired on to Oracle during the savings and loan crisis. And that had a lasting effect on the whole economy going south. And Oracle doing some not so good accounting practices and selling practices. We did our first layoff of significant 400 or 500 people right within a year of your hiring. And also, but that was a crisis where almost Oracle, and many of you don't know, almost ran out of money. It wasn't for a Japanese large infusion of a $200 million deal, Oracle would have closed its doors. What I want to say about that is that was a crisis, maybe starting with the industry, but going to a company. And a lot of the young people, such as yourselves, probably didn't realize that was happening. But what I saw, being a little bit older, was that there was a transformation. A lot of people left Oracle, and the people who stayed made it into a very, very different company, a company that lasted for the next 30 years and actually thrived. So that's also not, I mean, I think I want to explore that today quite a bit is, as a young professional, or as any professional, how should you engage yourself, be in tune with what makes the company successful, and in fact, be a part of that change. which is what I think creates great companies. And let's jump right into that. So the next topic that perhaps just pivot on that is, I'd love to, since there's such great span of experience here, talk about, maybe we can characterize, the type of company, the site. We have Dorene representing very large companies, Stewart, who's only been startup, but they're pretty big startups after he gets into them, and Linda with a very deep vertical view of the things. Let's characterize the industry and the companies. How do they face such crisis? Maybe we can start with Dorene. Take the question.
Yeah, I think if a leadership team has never really had to prioritize before, they are definitely likely going to do it now. In fact, they are probably already having these discussions as we speak. Over the past 10 years, we have seen companies on an up and up trajectory. We saw startups hiring people by the dozens, expanding into different markets, like reaching billions in valuation without needing to show much profit to their investors. We saw large corporations hiring without needing we saw large corporations needing to show profit and take risk in areas that they have never ventured in. These larger corporations, they're going to have to rethink their strategies. Should they go back to their core bread and butter? Should they pivot to something else? What should they stop doing, or continue doing? Some of them may look at their mission statements and go, why am I making fish balls? So instead of having a ton of goals and objectives, they're likely going to make decisions on the top few, maybe top 3 to 5 things, projects or goals that they're going to focus on in the long term and short term, and hopefully be clear about it to the rest of the organization. So those goals, may sound something like, we must increase revenue by capturing customers in automotive or medical segments, or like we need to focus on strategic moves, like bringing back manufacturing back into the US again, or we need to improve our bottom line now, or will not survive. Even if it's not communicated directly to you, you can likely read about it in the news, by listening into earnings calls, or just by asking for it. I think it's important that you know what your company priorities are, so that you can understand and make decisions on where to spend your time during this crisis.
So big takeaway there, sounds like focus. Well, let's try that with Stewart. I mean, Stewart, startups are all about focus. So that's all you do as, just to survive. What do you do in a crisis? You're already doing that.
Yes, I think the startup, one thing is focus, the other one is managing your costs, and also focus on getting a product, getting the revenue. Okay, for example, in this kind of pandemic, very easy, people going virtual. When you go in virtual, then people means collaboration. That means people means everything going digital, right? So then I think that's actually one thing is very good. Once you go digital, you don't need the office, so you can do a startup through Zoom, okay? And then there's so much opportunity, because suddenly it's a different world. When it's a different world, it's a Virgin Island, so you can try to do whatever you can do. Okay, there's many opportunities I have seen so far. So I think this is when you do, and then also people talk about, hey, would this be this great recession? So if I do something, maybe I have to. There is no time for me to come back up. No, I think this will be a U-shape, because I think people come back to spend. Once people come back to spend, then you'll be ready. You'll be the big winner. Talk about my experience. For example, in my first startup, I managed to give my investor 100 times of investment return in 3 years. Why? Because I managed the cost and focused on execution. When people told me, hey, Stewart, you have this technology, you can do this, you can do that, I said, no, I just want to focus on what I'm good at. So eventually I've come out winning. And then a lot of people who at the time was like a big unicorn, eventually actually, because they didn't turn profit, when the bad time hit them, well, things happen, right? So a lot of time go bankrupt. I think this is right now, this is what happened. Like I'll give you one quick example I just read. WeWork, for example, a big unicorn. They only did about $900 million business, but they lost about $1.something billion in 1 quarter. So how can this kind of company survive? So I think we'll have to see. Peter?
Yeah. No, I totally, I think that's very well taken to point. Those are business 101, right? I mean, I think on the other side of the table, I was a venture capitalist in the late 90s into the 2000s. And, it's the ones that were ready to go IPO, that were spending money, acquiring customers, that actually got hurt the most. And on the other extreme is the people who really just focused on, in some ways, they were much more focused. They used their cash wisely. They raised what they needed, and then they focused on doing that. That ended up surviving through, the most difficult times. So, Linda? Yeah. Sorry, Stewart, did you have a follow-on or?
Yeah. This is why I said I think the industry is changing, especially in the Silicon Valley. It's changing from the unicorn. That's why I used the example to really the camel. So that means you need the adaptability, to adapt to the resilience and the harshness of the environment. I think the environment coming will be, very harsh. But one other thing is now everything will become cheap. That means you can acquire office space cheaper. You can acquire talent cheaper. You can acquire. There's a lot of opportunity. So this is a great time to do startup. So if you are a young mind over there, if you really think, you don't think about you are an entrepreneur. Just try it out to some new startup. I think that you will see the opportunity. You never know. I gave an example about casino. Maybe I did not elaborate properly. I always said the startup is like doing a casino with a little bit chit-chat. You know why? Because very simple. It's calculate risk. But then when you're young, you go in, you can lavish. But when you're old, you really don't have that kind of leverage to try, because you'll be older. You have kids. You have a older parent to take care of. There's no way for you to do any startup or join a startup because you want the stability.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because you had me kind of worried a little bit just sending everybody to the casinos, which is by itself. No, but I think that's what it is right. It's I think it's about, that's what I think the seminar we're trying to get is give you perspective on the type of industry, the type of companies, because I mean, we'll get to Linda soon, is that ed tech is exactly at that juncture where I think a large number of ed tech companies will fail because they didn't do it like the camels. Maybe some were even unicorns. They thought they could be unicorns forever. But then there are others who are going to make it because of, I think it's when you have the skills, when you have the discipline. And so I can't agree more than that. So Linda, why don't we talk about both the storm? The storm is something that could kill you, but the storm that could also push you far, very, very far ahead to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think kind of in thinking about the effect that this crisis had on the current sort of the edtech ecosystem as it was, and you're very right to say that it's been a mishmash of different startups, some who had really felt that they had the answer and the next big idea, and we're really trying to see if it could take off. But when the pandemic hit, I think we all saw that there was news about schools and universities having to close down, and everyone was impacted. Kids are staying home instead of going to school. Parents are just having to become teachers overnight, and then college students are having to come home and live with their parents, which is actually a huge identity crisis for these college students. And so while all of that was happening behind the scenes, those of us in the edtech industry kind of went into surge mode. So we had to scale up all the infrastructure to support the spike in demand that Peter was showing with the number of logins and uploads and the users getting created and logging in. The interesting thing is that now, kind of after it's been a couple of months now and people have gotten through that initial spike, they're starting to, so we've had a lot of different ways that we've kept in touch with all of the different members of this community. And the reflection right now is, first of all, people had to realize that all their content and things that they were trying to do in the classroom doesn't replicate one-to-one to an online Zoom environment. So after a while, you realize, well, you know, kids can't spend 8 hours a day in Zoom calls. That's just crazy. So what teachers have started learning is they got to break up their content. They got to maybe do like a check-in in the morning, then like have kids doing an activity kind of offline, and then come back and check in maybe after lunch. There's a lot of new creative ways that people are using Zoom. We know like there's people giving music lessons and Taekwondo over Zoom. So that's been kind of an interesting phenomenon to observe. But when you kind of, as you were saying, Peter, there's also kind of that downside. I think everyone, we were very grateful that we were able to accommodate that surge with the cloud infrastructure that we had, and that was a clear winner. But then there's also challenges. It turns out that, you know, the sort of same problems around equity and access are still there. There's pockets where kids don't have access to get into the systems. And so, you know, school districts still find that they are not reaching everyone. And sometimes those problems where people get disconnected, it can actually be exacerbated now that we're all online. Another problem is high stakes exams like the SATs. The College Board canceled SATs and didn't even put a date out for when they were going to postpone them. So a lot of kids who were planning to take them just were kind of in this very, very strange limbo state. They've now just announced that they're going to go to maybe a remote proctoring type of situation. The AP exams have gone to a take-home open book, but it went from like a 3-hour exam down to 45 minutes. So a lot of like the way that kids are getting assessed is kind of up in the air and in question. With all of that uncertainty, luckily, thankfully, the colleges have actually made a lot of accommodations to make sure that it's not going to count against them. So at least that part has tried to stay somewhat sane. But I think in general, I think what we're trying to learn now from our industry is that businesses that are doing well are the ones where they can kind of tend to the fundamentals, that they just work, that they have the ability to scale, and that they have a solid user experience. And I think in the end, like you said, Peter, there are definitely going to be casualties with companies that really didn't have that formula right. And then there will be those who do survive.
Yeah, I mean, just anecdotally, right? I have a daughter who is doing all her college decision, and we went to many, many seminars, the ones that are overseas, locally, and one of the vendors for one of the major universities just completely failed. For 4 hours, you couldn't sign on, you couldn't get in. They kept sending emails, say, apologize, we'll get you online. And so, you know, I think that's an example of how, while it's a great opportunity, they probably got a great deal, but they couldn't deliver. And the other point is, this is all just personal takeaways, right? My wife is actually an elementary school art teacher. And you can imagine, how do you do this? She was very resistant to the whole idea. You cannot do elementary school kid art, which is all about touch and seeing virtually. We encourage her enough, and she's actually delivering. And the nice side, just as takeaway, is that we talk about this a lot, is that in this new world, in fact, the delivery channel is a lot more one-to-one in a way. So you lose some of the personal proximity and touch, but the engagement in terms of student attention, they feel like you're talking to them on a one-on-one basis. So for a certain part of the classroom, it's actually going to be better. Obviously, it's not the same experience. So anyway, these are things that I think carrying to the business world as well, is that you can't just hide in the last large meeting and say, well, there's 25 people in here, I'm just going to go in my corner and be quiet. I think this is a time where there is an opportunity to be even more one-to-one, even in a large meeting setting, given the kind of setup that these kind of technology delivers, right? So that's an excellent sort of a quick transition from looking at industries and companies and characterizing how companies respond. Part of our framework wants to dive down into, well, fine. I heard from Dorene that I need to sort of find out what the leadership thinking, get myself involved, sort of understand where that's going. And then Stewart talks about that's how startups operate. So whether you're in this kind of environment, that kind of environment, how do you then as an individual, right, in your role, sort of approach this crisis. So what should one do? And then, talk about the kind of roles and the kind of style and characteristic that help shape you into a leader in times of opportunity. So, Stewart?
Sorry. Yeah. This is actually a big question to answer because everybody is different. But I think the way our perspective is, you look at you have to I always say, you have to look in the mirror, reflecting yourself and see what you're good at it. Are you good at as an engineer, or you're good as a manager, or you're good at both? Okay, do you really have the charisma to be a leader, or you think you are pretty good as a team player? I think this is all different. Everybody is different. So what I meant about startup, some people can do the CEO, some people can be a CTO, some people can be a good program manager. But I think it's all depends on your own personality, your own capability. So everybody's perspective is different. But I always want to say is, in this pandemic, actually, it's very easy for you to succeed if you focus. Why? For example, if you're doing something in the company, I kind of use my son's work job as an example. He joined a very interesting company called Cannabis Company. And Cannabis Company, actually, they go in vertical. So it's one of the largest cannabis company. Well, initially, I didn't want him to join, right? So because I never know what would try the cannabis. But eventually, when I saw the company, actually, I even personally invest in the company because I think that's the future. But however, coming back to the experience, so he was doing the website. He was doing the all this .com. So doing people can order from the website and then they go to delivery. So it was a smaller part of the contribution of the company. And then because the company mainly is have a large retail shop, this pandemic hit, they lay off all the retail shop guy, and he was doing only the front end. And then I've been telling him, you need to also go check on the back end. So he listened, and he was doing that. Now he becomes a key player. In just 1 year, he joined the company. I say, you keep up, you'll be somebody because in service. So this is the prime example how you prevail, thrive in the small corporation. This company just never come to him, right? So he suddenly one day he wake up, the CEO say, "Oh, this pandemic hit, let's go all digital." So you becomes a key player. Now the CEO talk to him all the time. It's a 400, 700 people company from a he just graduated from the college. So this is just tell you how the opportunity hit.
So be ready, and so because when it happens, you could be the one, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So,
this is always the opportunity. Always there. Just whether you know how to find it.
Sounds great. Linda, want to take follow up?
I mean, I'll just jump in there. I think those are great examples, Stewart. I also just want to say that for this group, I think one of the best things that you can do during this time is actually to come to events like this. I think this is a fantastic way to learn from others, get the perspective, just take the time to reflect and absorb and figure out what all of these perspectives mean to you. And then maybe try to identify what goals you want to set for yourself going forward. I would say that the fundamentals ultimately are still very much at play here. So skills like communication, maybe there's like some kind of technical skill that you might want to get better at, but maybe you just want to learn how to make sourdough bread like everybody else is doing, or seems like a lot of people. I myself have been kind of exploring ways to improve time management, just kind of, different strategies and talking to people that I know and sharing tips and then just trying things out. This is actually a really good time where people will understand that the normal is not really normal. And so it actually is an opportunity for that kind of disruptive learning process that everybody goes through. When you first start learning something, you're going to make mistakes and it's going to feel uncomfortable and awkward, but kind of take advantage of the fact that everybody's doing uncomfortable and awkward things right now. And so, you know, look around and try to learn or, you know, kind of figure out what you want to do for yourself. Just wanted to add that there's actually a couple resources that if you don't already know about them, I would highly encourage you to go look. So a while ago, about 10 years ago now, there was a phenomenon called MOOCs, which is the massively open online courses. Basically, famous professors were teaching famous classes for millions of students online all over the world. So you could take a course, like a Stanford course on AI from one of these guys like Andrew Ng or Sebastian Thrun. And when they first started, the courses weren't great, but in the last 10 years, they've actually improved a lot. They very much get to kind of these bite-sized pieces. They can be consumed in different ways. You can kind of audit the course, don't have to take it for a grade, or you can actually pay a little bit and then get a certificate. So depending on your level of commitment, you can still get something out of it, and they're all free at that really basic level. Those are good to know. There's a lot of different choices in different areas. And then the other platform that's a good one is LinkedIn Learning. So some companies, if you already work for a company that has a LinkedIn Learning license, you can go on there and learn a lot. In fact, my company is letting our children take advantage of LinkedIn Learning classes just as part of our company license. So these are all really important things you can look into.
And I think that's a great suggestion before we get to Dorene. I think that, for example, Faye, you're out there, you know, I'm glad that you invited me to sort of challenge one another to do a class together. So I say, get with your friends, sometimes doing it together, it keeps you motivated and focused to explore something new. Now, before we get to Dorene, I saw a question on the side that says, in times like this, right, Stewart talks about focus, making you better in what you do. But then there's a question of how do you broaden yourself, right? How do you make that trade-off or balance to stay very focused because it's a crisis, but yet, you know, you want to sort of rebuild yourself. So anybody was jumping on that? So before we get to, well, maybe Dorene, you can take that, right? So this is, how do you stay focused and do well in your position, but yet, you know, grow so that you're ready for the new opportunities?
I know this is a strange thing to say in a crisis environment, but I think like attitude is really important in maintaining that focus. It's really important to rather than thinking, hey, I'm trying to survive during this crisis, to get excited about what's happening around you. And I'll echo something that Stewart mentioned earlier about new ideas during this time, especially in larger companies. New ideas or improvement to current business processes that are like in alignment with the new company strategies. Those are going to be really valued at this time. Some of the craziest and most exciting projects that I ever was involved in were in crisis downsizing time period were amazing. They eventually led to promotions. So for example, there was this one time where we had to, in a time of crisis, we had to integrate 3 different acquired companies within a period of 2 months. And that was one of the best projects I ever worked on. In another crisis, I worked on developing a really cool software solution in an area that I had no experience at all. So maintaining that focus is really important. And to echo what, again, Stewart and Linda mentioned before, I would say my advice also is don't let crisis go to waste.
So Dorene, just follow up on that, right? So in large companies, unlike small startups, you probably they're much more focused and there's only 7 things they're doing. But in large companies, you're always doing 100 things. You compare down from 500 to 100. So how do you get yourself, I mean, it sounds like you made some interesting pivots and were given certain opportunities. I'm sure they didn't just land in your lap, right? What do you do to be a part of the change, to be a part of with the attitude to go and get access?
Really, one of the main things I would say was to stay engaged with the leaders of the organization, of my organization at the time, my coworkers, and also the customers, to encourage that sense of trust. People tend to be really a lot more empathetic of one another to get through a crisis. So they'll tell you more things. So my best relationships with managers and senior leadership team will actually form during these times of crisis. They will tend to want to hear your thoughts. So I remember during those times where they will ask me for my ideas, and in normal times, sometimes I would give my ideas, sometimes I wouldn't. But at a time like this, or in times of crisis, I was finding myself giving ideas, having them heard, and them allowing me to go ahead and implementing them. So that was one of the cool things that occurred.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, Gloria, I hope you guys are taking good notes, because some of this stuff I think is also beyond what we already do in a lot of the NJA mentorship program. These are amazing lessons we're getting from these speakers and prior speakers. We can really re-up our program. Anyway, a little 5-second commercial for our mentorship program. Thanks for that. What I'd like to do at this time is I think we have some polls that are prepared. So David will serve them up. So if you're in the audience, please do chime in on the polls. And also, Casey, can I turn to you to sort of take some of the questions that's been queuing up in the Q&A? Perhaps you can share it with our panels.
Yes, hold on. There's a number of questions I like to actually ask the panel, because I think the theme is very, very close to it. Like Larry is asking, when there's a crisis, there will be change. Like when there are changes, there are new opportunity. How can one make sure to be in front of the change rather than waiting for the change? And then similarly, like how do you kind of balance what you want to expand a new skill? And I would take a quick answer to Larry's question, because it's one of my passion, but I also want to open up to the panel to answer. Larry's question is like, how do you know the opportunity? I always use this analogy. It's like when you do serving in a wave, because I remember when I first learned how to serve, it's the key is how do you paddle ahead of the wave? So whether it's a pandemic, whether it's economic downturn or economic upturn, how do you stay ahead of the wave? Because if you don't paddle fast enough, the wave will crush you. If you paddle fast enough, then you can actually ride the wave. And that is a good analogy for myself, because once I learn how to serve, I know how to look for things that is coming and not wait for things that crush on you. So be ahead, always be conscious about your strengths, about your weaknesses, about the opportunity you want to try, and leverage those waves that come in and out and be able to step in. So panelists, anything to add for this?
Yeah, I want to say, this is Stewart, I want to say something. Whether it's a big company or small company, as I mentioned earlier, you need to take a step back, reflect yourself, see what you're good at. Number one, make sure that your position, if you want, whether a big company or small company, you need to try to see that the why company needs you. I see people that in the past, they didn't even know why they were laid off, because they saw they were doing very important job. The other thing is also very important, as I mentioned, to reflecting to Dorene was talking about, it's really, when I talk about my son, it's really about open mind. When my sons talk about this cannabis company, I say, most parents actually, probably very few Chinese parents would say, let your kids go to do cannabis, and not let alone my son. And when I told my son, say, you should also look at the back end. If he said, no, Dad, I cannot do it. But instead he said, let me try it. So this is all talk about open mind. So when you are in a big corporation, it's the same thing. Don't just say stick on your own job. Look about what's in the front of you, what's on the back of you. Look at the whole big system. Look at how I can solve the problem for my manager. Look at how I can help the company grow. The whole new strategy. If there's something, it's not, try not to do something nice to have. Try to do something you must have. Especially this pandemic.
So Stewart, there was actually a follow-up question similar to what you say, like when in this time, how do you balance the focus on the strength and expanding to new opportunity that may not be your strength. You kind of touch on some of those.
Yeah, but this is very hard because everybody is different, right? So as I mentioned, how you balance and then how you focus. This is actually all hand in hand. You know, you want to kind of like go back to Linda said, how are you going to time manage it? Everybody have different talent and different responsibility at home, at work, right? So this is all depends on you. But I think the key thing is really, I mean, for me, my success formula is very simple: open mind, focus, and execution. When I think about something, I just go do it. I'm not just waiting. Okay. You know, and when people come to me, I would not say, no, this is not something I like to know. I've been open. The same thing to the young kids. I always encourage people, you come to MJ, Monte. Why? Because you never know what's going to happen. You know, I discovered I was working closely with one of the mentee assigned to me this, you know, in this session. You know, we might form a very great startup. I said it might be $1 billion opportunity in the future. So this is all the opportunity. You come up, you open mind. That's, you know, as I mentioned earlier, opportunity is there. Just whether you know where it is there.
Yeah, I'll just add to what's already been said, which has been great. I think one other thing that I think about is sometimes people say, oh, you have to, you know, people were in the right place at the right time. And really, when you think about like how did that happen? I feel that many times it is because there was already a relationship in place. And so in these times of crisis, this is actually an opportunity to reach out to people and connect with them, even if it's not going to lead to a direct assignment or anything new. But this is, so what you want to be in a position to be the person who made a connection, and then you know, if it's someone that you value and respect, and then now they value you, then you can be called upon at some future point to be able to, you know, they can give you an opportunity later. So you don't want to just like be like, why isn't anybody coming to me to ask me for help with something? You know, let me just figure out who else I can connect with, not expecting any immediate opportunities. And this actually can lead to those kind of opportunities that might look like they were, you know, sudden or out of the blue, but actually it comes from a very solid relationship that's already in place.
So Linda, since you are on answering question, there's a question specifically to Linda.
Yeah.
Many schools do not offer much live teaching. Basically, parents become teachers. Could you share what prevent them, even private school, from offering live teaching online? What do tech ed provide response to schools' challenges?
So, I mean, I think the observation there is that, you know, in a way, teachers are, and this is something that we've seen, teachers are at very different stages of development when it comes to the ability to promote what they're doing in the classroom into a more remote or online setting. And so you have a couple different things going on there. For one, if you're like a school administrator, you might say, oh, gee, I don't know if all my teachers, if I can ask them all to do exactly what they're doing in the classroom, just shift it to all online. So I'm not even going to ask them to do that. So it's almost like lowest common denominator is going on here. And in a way that causes some imbalance, because the teachers who probably could do it, the students are going to miss out on that. On the other hand, like I've seen actually at some schools, they actually shifted in an emergency way. They shifted resources to support the teachers, to actually help them be better at delivering their classes online. And so in those situations, it seems like the schools have been more successful. So it really depends on how much support is being given behind the scenes to help with instructional support.
Do you think they will cancel SAT and ACT permanently, and then testing is no longer a predictor of successful college performance? Do you think that will happen?
So yeah, that's a great question because that's what a lot of people in our industry are thinking about right now. That there's that and whether school should be seasonal or all year. So related to the testing question, one of the interesting phenomenon is over the years there's been a movement that hadn't really caught on in the mainstream, but it was around competency-based education. So if you could do something and could prove it in a way that was more practical, you were allowed to do that, and you could get credit for doing some sort of, I know already how to solve these kinds of this class of math problems, so I don't have to actually go and take necessarily a whole course on it and pass some tests and then get certified or get it to apply towards some kind of attainment. So with the SATs and the ACTs, I think there will still be some measurement. There needs to be some assessment, but that assessment may evolve. And they may go to using what's called multiple measures. So they want to use not just your standardized test score, but they also want to look at other forms of demonstrations of competency, demonstrations of what you can do and what you know, and that may involve things that they look at that are outside of just your traditional classroom or school-based learning.
So I guess that brings to the point that a lot of the teachers are probably not ready or trained to deliver that way, which is a issue, but at the same time, to what we talk about, or people who are willing to take on the new way of teaching and learn new skills, that becomes opportunity, right? So
yeah,
I think
so like one example,
right?
So just to throw in there, if you guys know, so in the AP exam, there's a macroeconomics AP exam, and I guess the College Board decided that they were going to offer recently a Zoom class with Janet Yellen, who's the former Federal Trade Commission. So she has now become so it's an attempt to use the power of broad distribution and kind of what they might call celebrity teachers, and that can also help with spreading the knowledge and making sure that there's a consistent way that people are getting very good quality instruction.
So Peter and Stewart and maybe Dorene, in the time of change, how do you identify what is true growth versus what is false positive?
My take is very simple. As I mentioned earlier, think about it, whether this is must-have or it's just nice to have. So, for example, in this pandemic, so Zoom becomes a must-have, right? Before, no one would know that this kind of, collaboration or VoIP software could be so big. You only have WebEx. Now I have a Ring Central, you have a Zoom. Now even Facebook want to come in with virtual room. So this is kind of becomes a must-have. This becomes, so in the past, there was also something like, for example, the test kit for the COVID-19. Before there were, suddenly there's about 100 companies come up, right? This is because it's must-have. This is not nice-have. Yeah, so kind of like, this is my view. So when you build something, you need to see, am I building something to the heart of my consumer or my customer? Is company is building something that can rid of the issue and get into the growth?
So I'll chime in. I really want to hear the panelists talk, but when I was an investor, you put a lot of money in 1997, 98, 99 to these companies. One company was building a lot of interesting supply chain solutions. They had 3 business units, right? And when this hit, I was asked to go in and say, we have to make a decision. And after some quick analysis, you're given about 3 days to do such studies. And with as much data you can gather in 24-hour basis, we end up cutting out 2 businesses completely. And that was a hard decision, but that was based on what the customers were still buying. and what the customer are doing. It may seem a little short-term focused, but that's how you get through, it's part of the focus, is that you give away some of the dreams that you cannot support in the next 18 months. Customers have no cash, you have no cash, customer has no desire, they're abandoning it. So I think it comes back to really having that conversation, engaging with your customer to say, what is that you need now? I'll do that, but I'll do it better. And in fact, that company then turned that around to one business unit, and we sold the company 4 years down the line after the recovery. But you had to lay off 2 business units, which is 70% of the workforce, and you put money into the one. And the idea is that it's better than losing all 3, 18 months down the road, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. Yeah, in the good time, all full cylinder, everything open, right? Everybody's roaming. But then I think you have multiple business running. But in the bad time, people get constrained. Just like, as I said, managing what's the must-have. I think that all the company doing that. And managing what's must-have and keep your vision if you can. But if you couldn't, well, you just have to survive, just like Hamill right now.
So I want to ask Dorene, I mean, a large company is probably harder to sort out who's got the hot air and who's always just talking, but who's got the real projects. Any insights on how do people sort of filter out the false positives that way? Some people just talk louder than others, right?
I think in large companies, we're always looking at what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Is it even a problem? Is it even a problem? Because a lot of times we kind of live in a bubble, like within our own company, and so we tend to, as we innovate and we create things, sometimes we create things that are for the nice to haves, like Stewart had mentioned before. And so large companies tend to look at things from a perspective of problem solving and prioritizing that.
Casey, are there other burning questions? I think you lump about 3 or 4 of them into one. Any others from the audience?
There is a couple, like in the time of crisis, how do you foster leadership from others in the team? And also there's one like talking about in crisis, there's new opportunity. But if you are stuck in a kind of bad situation, like if you're in the oil industry or in the Airbnb industry, what do you do? I mean, do you stay and try to grow your career there, or do you just jump ship and go to a different type of business model?
Well, I like that question, because let me just add to that. I mean, I think in our preparation, we talked about what if you are in the travel industry? What if you're the corporate event planner for your company? Are you still going to have a job, or if they keep you around, what do you do now, right? So I think love to hear the audience to go around on that one. Not the audience, panel, excuse me. How about I dish that over to, Stewart, you want to go first? Go for it.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned everybody's different. In the time like this, my take is always, if you find new opportunity, go jump it. If you're young enough, if you feel that you reflect yourself, you think you can weather the storm, just go do it. Because sometimes when you keep on, if the ship is sinking, you keep on doing it, you're still going to sink. So that's my perspective. But however, I also want to bring a different view. In the earlier case was one of the attendee asking about how you foster the leadership in corporation. In my perspective, it's very simple. Leadership it's not being given. It's been built by yourself. That's number one. And also, as a company working together, if you want to be a leader, you are not being given as a leader. You have to build yourself as leader. If you are the manager, you want to build somebody as a leader, you need to give him the opportunity to build as a leader. You need to entice him to be a leader, okay? Because a lot of engineers, they just good at what they're doing. They never know they are the leader. Okay, so the different perspective. So it's the both ways, not a single direction.
Totally agree.
Yeah, to the question on whether or not I jump ship to a different company if I think my company is sinking. I would something comes to mind from the mentorship program. We were having dinner with Carol Carpenter, and one of her analogy really rang true for me, which is the analogy of a jockey and a horse. She gave this. You could be the best jockey on a horse that's just not, doing very well, or you could be a really mediocre jockey on a horse that's really, really good, right? So it's a choice, and so I would look at it from a domain versus skills expertise. So domain expertise is essentially like knowledge in a particular field, like healthcare, education, electronics, manufacturing, retail, etc. And skills are like product management, project management, business transformation, computer languages. So I would likely not choose a role in a great company where I'm a beginner in both domain, in terms of domain and skills. Because I'll be starting at the very bottom of the ladder, right? I would choose a role where I'm either an expert at either both, or at the very least, just one of them. For example, like my skills is in business transformation. So if I was offered a role in, say, Facebook today to be a data scientist, even though I would really like to eventually be doing it, like do coding and things like that, I would likely not join. Yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents.
That's a great point, Dorene. And I want to kind of add to that just a personal story that is somewhat related to that, which is at one point I was in between jobs in my career. I had been in the education space for a while, and actually Faye, I reached out to Faye, and she had a connection to someone who was one of the regents for the UC system, University of California. And one of the things I was trying to explore was, do I want to go work for a university? I'd been kind of on the side of building products for universities, but I thought maybe I could actually go work at a university. And so thanks to Faye, I got to meet this person, and he was super nice. But what he really wanted to tell me was, don't go work for a university. You're not going to like it. The pace is very slow. And really that meeting with him ended up being him trying to recruit me to join his healthcare startup. And so it led me to think about, well, do I want to switch into a different industry where I would kind of have to start over? It was a great opportunity. And he was trying to tell me, oh, well, like from a segment perspective, the places where people are investing is probably going to be more on the healthcare side and less on the education side. Education is kind of where there's always like limited budgets. It's not necessarily the place where a lot of spending is happening. But what it did for me was I kind of did some soul searching and sort of realized that at this point in my career, with all of the investment that I had in education, that actually is my brand and what I really felt strongly and passionate about doing. So I decided, I kind of recommitted to stay in education based on that, even knowing that it's not necessarily kind of like the big rocket ship that's going to take off. But for me in my career, it's actually been very fulfilling and very fruitful. So that's just something that I have taken to heart, and it is different. It's a kind of different decision for everyone.
So Peter, I have one more question that maybe I'd like to throw it out there. It was from Jerry. He was asking, knowing that the crisis come, we all talk about new opportunity, we all talk about startup, but what are the hidden things as a leader or team member that we usually just look forward for new opportunity, for new challenges, but forget there's some softer side like team morale, like strategy. What's your take on that?
Well, we actually talked about this before, right? So first is maybe I throw that at Dorene, right? Because I think there's a perspective. I mean, Stewart has said a lot about this is a time where there's plenty of talent. Startup can get the talents with the right price. Rent will be affordable for a change. And also you can go global now given the technology platform we have. But on the flip side, right, Dorene, for large companies, if you're a leader there, one of the issues is going to be you don't have the same kind of bonuses and raises that you can oftentimes use to dangle at people. How do you retain talent, right? So just starting with that, how do you retain talent when people like Stewart are now grabbing all the great people that you have?
Well, first of all, I think companies will likely be more flexible with employees going forward. There's already a study, I think, that stated 76% of workers will be more willing to stay with their current employer if they could work flexible hours. So if you're looking for more work-life balance, work-life harmony, may not get a super big bonus this year, this can be a good time to have a discussion with managers on this. And then secondly, larger companies, they may also provide more opportunities to advance skills or take on more challenging projects at this time, as companies do realize that employees end up moving on because they feel like they don't have any opportunities for progression in their current role. And so right now would really be a good time to say to your manager, hey, I've had a lot of time during COVID-19 shelter in place to think about what I would really like to be doing going forward. And here's where I think they intersect with the company. Could I take on this project? Could I take this data science class? And I think third thing too, you're probably, whether you're in a large or a smaller company, you're probably getting bombarded with emails and surveys from your leadership team asking you how you're doing and for your thoughts on improving or other suggestions on how they can help you get through this COVID-19 time. I would say speak up because of all of these uncertainty, they're really digesting all of this information.
I really like that because a lot of things that we teach in mentorship, which is to build your own value and network within the company. And this is to Stewart's points about looking at people around you. I would say if you're an engineer, look to your product manager, look to the marketing people. And often I tell people that think about how you can make their jobs a little bit better so that you're not just doing your piece and wait for them to come and ask for that. But if you can understand why they want a certain piece, I think this is the building blocks in getting a much, much bigger picture. And this goes back to alignment with how do you sort of extend yourself so that you see a bigger and bigger picture and really make yourself an invaluable part of that. So as someone who actually, unfortunately, I've done a couple turnarounds, and usually it's around downturns. After downturn, you have to go into a company, exactly like Dorene said, we had this many people, and this is what we were doing, but given the downturn, we have to pivot and do something very, very different. Done it for very different sizes companies that are in the tens of millions of costs that you have to manage down to very small ones. It comes down to, I think what Stewart said is, I look at people who are not they're very defensive. They say they're trying to protect what they used to do, what they're good at. I'm looking for people who actually are willing to just even say, well, what I was doing is not that important. Where do you need me? I think it goes back to attitude. I look for people who are willing to say, well, if the company needs to do this, I'm willing to learn something new to do that. So it's people with the mentality of willing to step outside of the comfort zone to do something that the company needs and not something that they want to keep their budget, to keep their team. And that's how I think I think myself and a lot of leadership have looked at people who are going to come out. Sometimes, I'm going to say it very cold-bloodedly, in the downturn is a time where you sort out who you're going to keep, who you're not going to keep. Because the people you're going to keep are going to help you keep the lifeboat alive for all the people that are still in the lifeboat. If you keep the wrong people, the whole lifeboat goes under with it too.
Well, you sounded so well, better than I said, Peter.
Well, I have a few stars too.
No, I think another thing I want to talk about is about team morale. I think in this downturn, a lot of people forget about something. If you in the office, you all have one-on-one with your manager weekly or monthly or bi-weekly. Where are you today? Are you still having the same thing? Is manager still doing the same thing? This is where the team morale coming, right? So, hey, as a manager, you care about your people. You still have this one-on-one. Do you care about his family? Okay, you might not be able to have a team lunch or team dinner, So this is a good time because he might need your care. He might want to hear your vision. As the engineer, you want to go to your manager, say, hey, I want to know, what do you need me for? Is there anything more I can do? Just like Peter was talking about, the attitude. Your forwarding attitude or your defensive attitude, that's completely different. So this is where you can shine, or you really become duo.
So I think I want to go to David in a second regarding, I think he was able to run some polls and maybe want to share some of the sort of summary from that. But before we get there, just for fun, right? I want to do a lightning round. I want to ask the panelists, give me 3 adjectives that describes leaders in times like this. Who wants to go first? Linda.
So I think so we did a session this week actually where I was doing a roundtable for an education analytics leadership group. And one of the things we started was the kind of, what are you grateful for? And so many people highlighted that the clear communication from their leaders was incredibly important. So for me, I think being clear and decisive and communicating. I look at like how well Andrew Cuomo has done in this crisis. I feel like I get a lot of security and solace when I watch how he's like, just doing those daily briefings. I also think if the person is a good listener, in that they can process information, that the information that comes to them is kind of, they're kind of wise about how to analyze it and take it in, but obviously not kind of swaying them here and there, but they have kind of a set of values that they can apply to making their decisions. So being able to consistently apply their values, and that they have a clear sense of what those values are. Okay.
I think, how about any adjectives come to mind for you, Stewart or Dorene?
Yeah.
So you, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dorene.
Oh, you're looking for adjectives, right?
That would be clarity, consistency.
Yeah. So yeah, my adjectives would probably be positivity, vision, and empathetic.
Very good.
Yeah, I think my perspective is, as a leader, you need to be have confidence. That's number one. The second thing is you need to be very, very key is you need to be focused on execution. The last thing is you need to be all-rounded, open-minded, as I mentioned earlier, again and again, right? So you need to be open-minded. You need to care for people. That's the best as a leader, because a leader is not just only focus on work. You also need to focus on people. People is your asset.
Yeah, so David, if I were to just jump to the side and look at the surveys, maybe you can summarize better, but I see, communicate across group comes across as a big red line. That means that's important, right? As just all the panelists have said. What else have you garnered from the polls that you put out there?
So if I took kind of a first stab at this, as I reviewed this, and give some time for you panelists to kind of look at the data as well. So question number one on, how aware are you of the company's strategic objectives? Most people sit more in the buckets of like partially aware, understood past objectives, but maybe not so clear on the future objectives. It's roughly half-half on that front. So I think more people are not as clear during this point of transition. So that's kind of like the distillation that I got from that first one. On the second question, are you aware of how your jobs align with new prioritizations? This was a multi-choice answer. About 43% said yes, they're fully aware and fully aligned, but actually there's more people that was only aligned to old objectives or are tangentially aligned or not aligned or unsure. So I actually think there's not a strong amount of clarity, right? So again, and I don't know what the data looks like when we kind of combine question 1 and question 2 together, but it still seems like there's a lot of unknowns, like this fog of war concept that's still out there, a lot of unknowns. On the third one, in terms of what skills do you think are important, What actually flagged out to me that I thought was really important was actually number 3, which is knowledge across departmental links. So because a company is not just siloed by department, we actually need to understand, especially as leaders, as managers, as executives, we need to understand how groups interact and evolve. And that being like a low amount, I would have a little bit concern with, just because it's more like I'm focusing in my own little silo and not taking care or being aware of what's going on. Because someone's like strength in understanding how cross departments are linked is going to impact how they communicate. If they don't understand how other departments work, it's not going to be effective communication. So this is a pretty interesting data point for me in terms of looking at where people thought importance lied. And then lastly, this is more like, what are you doing right now at this time to develop your leadership skills? I would say actually the minority of the people are actually running activities to actually drive leadership, or it's very spotty in terms of like activities and taking action. Most people after this question, they were now thinking about, oh crap, I should probably now do something. So this is kind of my distillation. And so I think these are good, like kind of like, sensing questions just to see where everyone's at. I'd love to understand like how the other panelists thought about this.
So on the questions, could people have picked more than one on some of these, or is it like they could only pick one?
So yeah, so the all of them except for the first one were multi-choice, so they could pick multiple on.
Okay. So like on number 4, people could say, I'm setting up virtual happy hours, and I'm also thinking about doing something. That's good to know. I was just going to say that this is an interesting, I agree with you, David, on number 3. And looking at the answers, this is like a good, we look at when you interpret results from a quiz, a lot of times how the questions were written, it comes into play. So one of the things that I think about when I look at that question is, were the answers sufficiently clear? It may have been that the one that got the lowest response was perhaps not as clear to people. But I do think that it's interesting when people are given the choice to pick amongst these different skills, that they are gravitating towards ones that involve communication and at some level awareness of the how their part fits into the whole.
Stewart or Dorene, did you have any comments on this, or maybe Peter?
I think on number 3, I was actually quite excited to see these results, because in the Monte Jade program, we really have been harping on, hey, I know that all of you are really great on the technical side, but in order to get there on the leadership front and really move up the career ladder, we really need to be working on our soft skill side. And so having the lowest score in terms of where the mentees and thought about skills that are important for individual contributor technical skill set, that's a really good thing, I think.
Yeah, I think as Asian America, I think one of the key difference between us and for example, like Indian America, is that we don't know how to express ourselves. That means we always focus on technical. I'm very good at what I'm doing, but I'm not very good at communicating what I'm doing. I think this is something that all of essentially when you're young, you need to know this is probably the number one thing you need to be professional at. Probably better, more important than your capability, than your work. If you do the work, but you don't know how to express yourself, people don't know what you're doing. You might, your credit might be taken by others. I'm not talking about you playing politics in the company. In a way, in the big corporation, this is something to do with politics. Okay, but I think the key thing, you need to know how to communicate yourself. I mean, in terms of knowing the company initiative, leadership, I think we talk about that a lot. I think the audience should know that where you should focus.
I think that's a great way for me to bring a lot of things together, right? I think that the communication is something we've always emphasized. but given the times that we're in, the channels are different. How you communicate, as I mentioned earlier, in a Zoom meeting is radically different than you sat in the meeting room with 5, 2, or 25 people, right? The Zoom has a very different way of highlighting sound bites. It's recorded possibly, and also with a different speaker gallery view, you need to sort of understand how to use that. And I think nowadays, because of perhaps the distancing, your ability to write very clearly, you know, whether it's in short snippets, in chats, or knowing how to chat properly is an art to itself. And also, I mean, for a lot of the younger people I work with, sometimes they carry their own very casual attitude into the chat rooms. And while that's friendly, sometimes it doesn't quite get the work productivity or professionalism that you're looking for, right? So we have to understand people are going to go more online on chats, online access, as well as write-ups and so forth. So your ability to articulate concisely, clearly is going to be very, very important. So think about these fundamental skills, as Stewart said. But let me
I'll just add one funny observation on that. It turns out that a lot of teachers have actually been looking for ways that they can connect with students on TikTok. So they are trying to meet the students where they are and learn the new things.
That's a challenge for me. Let me put it this way. But yeah. I think that, you know, this actually brings a lot of things together. As I said, is that I actually went to about 5 seminars that are about 2 hours each, run by Harvard Business School, and they got about 2,000 of the alumni together on average in each of these seminars, starting about a month and a half ago, really talking about crisis. They said this is a crisis that nobody has been able to teach, nobody's been able to predict because of all the criteria that I described in the very, very beginning, right? But the takeaway is that we need leaders at times like this. And what does it mean to be a leader? I think we covered that very well. It means that you have to be, as Stewart, you got to just take responsibility and also organize the team such that you're getting as much input as you can from all your constituencies, from your customers, from your investors, from your management, from your employees, and from if they have labor pools and so forth you have to deal with, you got to bring them all together and have very, very quick cycles on concise, clear, consistent communication. That's absolutely key because everything is changing by the day, by the week. In fact, a whole business could go away in 2 weeks. If you're not constantly communicating with all the constituencies in an effective way, you're not leading, right? So I think that starts at the very top. But if you're not part of the top leadership, for you to communicate up is just as important. They need the data in order to make these quick adjustments. So what they said was, it was funny. They said, you know, this is like running what you guys know very well, Silicon Valley. It's like running a startup. You're just constantly looking for the thing that you got to focus on, bring your team together, do these quick daily huddles and move on, but do it on steroids because everything's moving way, way, way faster. So I think this is something that we know how to do. I mean, this is our culture here in the Valley. And I think that, so we have to go back to what I want to start with Dorene's covered. Build relationships, you know, review those cross links across departments and communicate. And then bringing that down to Linda, talking about networking, right? Don't network because you need it. Network before you need it. And I think that's kind of the authentic, genuine way, like when I said, you know, find interest in how you can make other people's lives better. That puts you in that positive attitude of inserting yourself to become a greater part of the hub and not one of the spokes, and isolate as a spoke. Spokes go away in times like this. And I think lastly is to integrate what Stewart said is keep in mind, this is about flexibility, right? You want to build different skills, as Linda has also reiterated, build that flexibility. So when you put all this together, what it says is that this is a change. It's a tough change. And a lot of the change is irreversible, but also there are going to be changes in the positive, and those are the opportunities. And how you manage it at the industry, company level, and also at the personal skills level will make a big difference for you, for your company, and for all of us as a community, right? So I think that with that, I want to say, this is what Mount Jade is all about. I mean, I want to thank everybody who's been doing this for years, is to help one another. I mean, we talk about training, leadership, communications, bringing the community together to support one another. And I think this is a time that I'm very excited about David and his leadership in bringing together seminars like this for us to come together, share what we know, hear what you're concerned about, and do more. So in fact, I think we have a little bit of time left. David, I think we're going to continue these series, right? Because I find them, when I sat in on the previous ones and others, just learning from the speakers, it's phenomenally valuable. I hope we continue them.
Definitely. So we're going to continue these series. We're taking feedback from all the audience members. So if you have any comments of like new topics that you're interested in hearing about, please send them out. I know there's some macroeconomic questions, which maybe we'll take in another panel series as well. I want to make sure that everyone is aware that our mentorship program is going to be relaunching their open house series pretty soon to recruit new mentees. If you had a great time learning about mentorship and development and kind of career development in this last cycle, please tell your friends. I know Ryan would really appreciate some of the support on that front. So I'm going to plug it. I am not shameful about it. Make sure you tell your friends. A majority of you guys came in through referrals. And so I'm really excited about the program that is being put together.
Well, let me chime in on that. Is that David? I think you know what I really love about what you're doing with Monte and MJA is actually evolving the program. So I know we've talked about interest, and in the audience there are a lot of people who are former mentorship graduates. People like Dorene who are just going up to doing great things. We love to sort of connect all of you and give you something that you still think would be helpful for you, right? So tell us what you want, what you need at your stage that you've gone on for 5 years, 10 years. I know people from probably 15, 18 years ago. So we still want to develop because as David started, this is a leadership ladder that we need to build, not just at the entry level and mid-level. Our ultimate goal is, while it's long-term, it's also about pushing everybody up into the senior director, VPs, EVPs, and CXO level. That's our ultimate plan. And I want to see everybody chime in with us and say, how can we help you? We don't have all the answers, but working with you, I think we can do a lot.
Great. Peter, you want to wrap up?
I think we're good. Thank you, everybody, for your time on a Saturday morning. And thank you, panelists. And thank you, David and the team, for the support.
Thank you guys very much. I'm
Thank
looking forward to the next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Doreen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Casey.